Look, I know you've already achieved unheard of levels of success as an entrepreneur. So the real question is, while the world is radically shifting, how do we not get caught up in the chaos, but instead access our untapped capacity? You know what I'm talking about. I'm Katie Richardson, business coach to superstar entrepreneurs and host of What's Working Now. I'm here to show you how to unlock and magnify your untapped potential.
Hello. Welcome to What's Working Now. I am here with Rob Nelson, a man who has built and sold multiple businesses, who's been in the trenches of entrepreneurship. And today we're going to talk about, Rob and I were talking a couple days ago, and he said, Katie, everybody talks about the startup phase and the glamorous exit, but nobody talks about the messy middle. And so today we're going to talk about that messy middle. Rob's a father of 5. He's married to a beautiful woman. He's not just building a business, but he's building a life. And there's a lot of question marks as we're all navigating this ourselves. And so today we're going to talk about how Rob has navigated those in a way that has helped him to grow and expand his businesses and grow and expand his personal life. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Katie. Great to be here.
Yeah, excited to dive into your story. For anybody who's wondering, we are personal friends. We do know each other in IRL. And yet I'm really excited because I know there's so much about your story that I don't know. So one of the things that I do know about you is you are very passionate and driven. And I'm always really curious kind of where that started or where you first noticed that. So tell us the story of an experience that helped form and shape how you view the world today.
I'd say that, looking back, you've got these like breadcrumbs of entrepreneurship that I could see in my life. But it wasn't until like I sold the first company where I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm an entrepreneur. And it's funny to think about that now, but at the time it's like, I just kind of came into this thing and I kind of fell into something and was trying to be opportunistic. And then you go through the whole process and sell a company. And then I'm stuck in a larger company working for the company that bought mine.
Wow.
And being really frustrated that I couldn't just build and create, and then realized, wow, I am an entrepreneur. And then I think back like, oh yeah, I started companies in high school, it's like I started selling stuff in high school and had all of these experiences. It was like, oh, I'm much more of an entrepreneur than I ever gave myself credit for. So just didn't realize it in the moment until I had some event that changed my life.
Yeah, which is really cool because we can be really passionate, driven, motivated, sometimes by something that's not necessarily clearly defined to us. It's just like, I just feel like doing that. So when you started these businesses as a young age, do you know what it was that you were seeking? What is it you were trying to accomplish or do? Were you motivated because you like helping people? Were you excited about making money? What motivated you from a young age?
When I look back, it was, motivated by, I was dating my wife at the time and we were pretty serious, like about to get engaged, and was like, okay, I've got to do something to support her. And I was going to college and I just didn't have many options. And so somebody said, hey, there's this, investment that I made into this little business and it's struggling and they don't have any sales reps and nobody really knows how to sell it. Will you just come on and try and sell it? And so it was like, okay, well, that beats the alternative at like working at Olive Garden or something like that, right? So I opened up a little office and grabbed a phone and set that up and started cold calling. It was like cold calling every day.
Wow.
And I'd get in at like 7 a.m. when it's dark in the morning and cold call until 5 or 6 at night and making 150 cold calls a day. And I could not sell anything.
Rob, that is brutal.
Oh, it was brutal. And you're by yourself in a crappy little office. And it was tough. And I got married during this time. And I remember one time coming home and just crying to Lindsay, my new wife. And like, I don't know how to make this work. I thought this would be easy and I don't know what I'm doing. And I keep getting rejected and I don't even know what these words are on this script. Like, this is like a foreign language and I'm not, I thought I'd be good at business and I'm not. That's how I felt. And so I went back to the original investor and said, hey, this thing's a dog. Like, I'm not having any success. Like, I don't know how to sell it. And I called the company up and said, hey, none of these words make sense on this script. Can I just come into the corporate office and watch what you do for a week so I can understand it and be able to sell it better? And they wouldn't let me do it. They said, oh, it's too complex. You wouldn't understand it. Just stick to the script. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, and so I went to the investor and said, hey, this is a distraction. It's losing you money. What if I just run it as cheap as I can and get your money out of it? And was surprised that they agreed to that. And they said, okay. And so they had 4 people running it. I hired a gal and she was, 23 and I was 22. And she was incredible, really smart, really driven. And her and I just kind of figured it out. And then when, I started meeting with customers, because it had customers already, and said, hey, what do we do that you like? And some of the best advice I got early on in business in general was like, hey, just forget about experts in anything. Just boil it down to common sense. And it's coming back to like, first principles that we talk about now, but it's like, okay, what do you do? And what do you do with the stuff that we send you? And what's valuable? And what makes your life better? And how do I make it even better? And just asking a really basic question. And then it was like, oh my gosh, now I know where the value is. And I changed the script up and then started selling it and started to grow it. And then I went back to the investor and said, I think I can make this thing work. Could I buy this from you? And they said this astronomical price. The investor did. And I thought, and he said, anything you pay to this price before this date is the percentage that you'll own at the end of the date of this due date, 5 years out. Does that make sense? 5 years from now, whatever you pay towards it, you'll have that percentage. And I thought, well, if I could get like 20% of the business, that would be just awesome. And so Lindsay and I lived off rice and beans, and every penny just went to paying this. And I remember showing up a year, not a year, maybe 6 months before the due date with the full final payment, and then owned 100% of the company.
Get out.
Those first years, we just lived off nothing, and was able to pay it off. And then I had the company from that point on. And I think because I didn't set up the LLC or, didn't incorporate the company and do the initial name registration and domain filing or whatever, domain purchase, that because I didn't do that, I didn't think, well, I didn't start the company. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just kind of trying to be opportunistic.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, and after I sold it, after 12 years, it was like, oh, I did more than I thought.
Which is interesting. That's super cool. So a couple of things that I'm seeing with you, you're really curious and you are solutions oriented. You were seeing the problems and the obstacles with the script and selling, and you would come with solutions. They kept pushing back on you, and you would just keep problem solving until you finally found, you went and asked the stupid questions, which is so good. And too often we're not willing to, as you said, use common sense and just ask the questions that maybe nobody was asking, because a lot of times those are the stupid questions, but it's also the questions that everybody in the room has, but everyone's too afraid to say it. And you asked those questions, and that led you to changing the script, closing sales. It started working. And then you had the audacity. This is so good. Then you had the audacity to say, hey, can I buy into this? And they give you this wicked awesome deal, and you put your nose to the grinding stone. You got your wife on board, and you guys lived on very little means so that you could buy into ownership, which is super smart. What's interesting, Rob, is it's not like you sat down as you're dating your wife, your soon-to-be wife, and you whiteboarded out some grand fanciful plan. It doesn't sound like that's what happened. And yet
It's not what happened. Yeah.
no. And yet you were like, you just kept taking steps forward. It's not like you may have not necessarily had a plan, but I would venture to guess there was a certain direction that you were at least oriented and trying to find your way to that maybe far off, distant place. Do you know what that was at that time?
I think I knew I always wanted to start a company.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to do that. And, in fact, I grew up watching my dad build a company, and he was an entrepreneur. And I remember coming home from my mission that I served for our church, a 2-year full-time mission. And I sat my dad down in his office, and I said, okay, there's 2 things that I either want to do. One is I've never been great at school, but I'll be really great at school. And I'll be a professional student, and I'll finally take it serious, and I'll go get an MBA from the top tier Ivy League school. And then I'll come back in and work from the bottom up in your company, and you can groom me, and I'll want to be the CEO of the company. And however long that takes, like that's the path that I want to do. And that's probably my first choice. And the second choice is like, I'll just go start my own thing. What do you think, Dad? And he basically said, just go start your own thing. And I didn't take offense to that, because he was really proud of being an entrepreneur more than being a CEO. And he's like explaining that I don't know if this company's going to be around, and I don't know if it's going to survive or if I'm going to sell it or what the plans are, but I think you really do great building your own company. So I always had that in the back of my mind. And then when this came along, I was like, hey, I think when I first started selling, right, it was like, I think there's an opportunity here to somehow kind of create my own business. And that was, I think, what was in my mind, and what I was working towards is looking for ways to do that. And then you kind of get out of that and say like, okay, it just comes down to value. How do you create value for other people? And I remember at the time, like going out to meeting with customers, like I can't go in as the CEO or the president of this little company. Like they won't take me serious. So I remember making up some stupid title that like was enough to get their attention and to get the meeting, but not enough to like have final decision-making authorities. So I could be this young 23, 24-year-old kid in front of these big companies, like meeting with them. Right. So it's like, I had, I don't know, something like, this isn't a dumb title. It's just like some random title. It was like, director of business development or something like that. It like gave me enough credibility, but not so much that I could go in. And I think it's really helpful just to boil it down to really simple questions, like you said. And, just start over again. And at the time, you wouldn't believe what we sent these customers. We went through a process every week, and we sent them and printed off like a phone book of paper every week. We would just have massive printing and mailing costs. And it was like, hey, what do you do with this? It's like, well, we throw all of it in the garbage every week, except for one little like 2-page report. And that's the most important thing that you guys do. It's like, oh, really interesting. And so it's like, if we stop sending you that, would you be okay with that? Oh yeah, no problem at all. And then like all of a sudden I strip out, 60, 70% of the costs. And it was like, and boiled it down to like what they really cared about. So anyway, I thought it was really a great process just to go through and pretend like, I was new, but, go reset the business and just say, what is working and what's not? What do you do with what we give you? What do you care about?
Rob, this is so good. It seems so counterintuitive to me. I try to imagine a young 23, 24, 25-year-old saying to himself, well, I can't go into this meeting calling myself a CEO. They're not going to take me seriously. I would think most people in your position would think the opposite. I need these guys to take me seriously. Therefore, they need to know that I'm the one in charge. But you took an opposite approach. And what's interesting is, like, in a sense, I talk about this a lot, and with my entrepreneurs is like, you flanked them. It's like you didn't come at them in this direct way. You came at them from the side. And what's cool is people put down their walls, they put down their defenses, and you have a real honest conversation when you take that approach, which like the level of wisdom in your young mind is really cool.
Well, and I, at the time it was like, I just don't have the confidence to stand as the CEO.
Interesting.
And I'm learning a brand new space. I'm learning about the business. I'm learning the terminology of business. And so I think it was more out of, a lack of confidence.
Wow.
Right. And and one of the greatest things that's helped me is, you probably have seen Dan Sullivan and some of his things, but he shared the 4 C's, and, people say, well, I'll do that when I have the confidence. And he says, no. The confidence is the reward for the breakthrough. Mm-hmm. The first C is commitment, and you got to commit to something. And the second C is courage. And you go through this process of like sick to your stomach. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know if I should have even done this. Like, I'm kind of sick about it. And then that third C is capability. And then you have the breakthrough, and the confidence then comes. And so a lot of these moments of like, after I've committed to something, and then I start to get butterflies or start to question my decision, it's like, what C am I in? And that framework has kind of helped me realize like, hey, I chose this, I made the commitment. I'm just feeling I'm in this courage stage, and I got to keep going, got to keep working through it.
So good. So good. And again, you were willing to ask the questions that maybe other people hadn't been willing to in the past. You showed up with that, to use another C word, curiosity, and asking those questions like, hey guys, what's working for you? You keep coming back and working with us. So why is that? And I think too often we can make some assumptions. And that's one of the things I'm seeing in you is you have the courage to not make those assumptions. And you're going straight to the source and asking them, and you're listening and you're open. And then you're making adjustments from there, which is so good. So good. I love this. And to use another C word, you're setting things up in a way that you're not moving out of fear necessarily, that you're not moving out of obligation, but it's like, I want this, I choose this, which is a powerful place to be when we can choose it. So like, yes, this makes me sick to my stomach, and I'm choosing to move forward. But that's really powerful.
And I love this part about entrepreneurship is that you create something and have this vision, and then you get, and like we talked about in the intro, right? There's this romantic beginning and end that we all kind of obsess over. Right? It's like he started in the garage, and then he sold the company and made tens of millions of dollars or $1 billion, whatever it is. And, then there's this whole middle ground, right? And so we start out with, clarity and vision. And then it feels like every time we walk into work, you step into this whirlwind and it gets blurry. And you're trying, and then the clarity is gone. And that's, I think, you and I haven't known each other very long, but I've used coaches in the past that have been so transformational for me. And I'm such a fan of the impact that they have, is because, I think one of the hardest parts is just getting clarity on what you want. And that clarity gets, cloudy with just all of the messy stuff that you have to deal with. And so it's like, I'm not even sure I want to be doing this anymore, or what my purpose is. And working with someone just helps, has brought some of that clarity back in to me. And whether it's, settling on the vision and mission of the company again, or, hey, do I really still believe in this mission? And do I even want to be doing this? Because it's tough. It's hard work. It's really tough. There's have you ever seen the movie, The Biggest Little Farm?
Yes. Yes.
I remember watching it on a plane and they start out buying this big farm, I think somewhere in Central California. And year one is like, they just have to fix the soil. It's like, okay, how do we get water out to the soil and how do we just restore the soil? And every year they're trying to create this self-sustaining ecosystem, right? And every year there's problems. So like one of the years, the snails climb up the trees and eat all the leaves. And so then the next year it's like, okay, let's send the ducks out, and the ducks start to eat the snails and prevent them from doing that. And then they fertilize the trees. And then, birds come and they eat all of the fruit off the trees. And then coyotes come and they eat all of the chickens, right? And so it's like every year it's problem after problem. And after a while, they just solve these problems. And it took like 7 years before this thing starts to like become self-sustaining. And, they set out hawks to scare the birds away from eating the fruit off the trees. They have a guard dog that keeps the coyotes from eating the chickens. The ducks eat the snails, like I mentioned. So it's like all of these problems that have to get solved. And I remember watching this on a plane and just like bawling. Like, This is my company. This is my business. Just like problem after problem. But I'm trying to get it like self-sustaining, and it's just not. And it's just taking time and constant like effort and persistence to get this thing to where I want it to go.
Yeah. I felt the emotion of that. I was getting emotional as you were describing that, because I remember watching that being like, guys, like your dream is not realistic. It's not going to work. And like, there's a reason farmers of today are using pesticides and antibiotics and
shoot the coyotes. And they don't want to shoot the coyotes,
I know. The snails, I was like, oh, there's just no way. And like, literally they let the ducks loose, and within a couple hours, all the snails are gone. I was like, oh my word. That's amazing. Yeah. And, you mentioned a couple of things here. You talked about vision and mission, and those can be, as you're here's kind of what the landscape looks like. We have this vision. We imagine solving problems, creating our company into the world. And then we also subsequently imagine the beautiful road paved in gold to that place. And it's, perfect with no obstacles and no problems and nothing unexpected. And like, here's how we're going to do this. And you start down that road very quickly to realize that your projection of reality, your projection of future, AKA your plan, well, it was missing this potential risk and this obstacle. And you didn't see those things from where you were standing when you put together this beautiful plan of yours. And those are the moments where all of a sudden our vision becomes super cloudy. And it's like, yikes, what do? I wasn't planning on snails. I didn't see this as a possibility. And those are moments where we can get really trapped in our head, right? And it's like, who do I think I am? What am I even going after? Am I crazy for dreaming this and imagining that I'm capable of these things? And, I think the Little Big Farm, I think is what it's called, or Big Little Farm. I think that analogy it's such a good testament to kind of holding on to that vision and having resilience in those moments. And, that sounds great and fine, but maybe tell us some stories about days where you're walking down that path, AKA the plan that you had created, and all of a sudden something unexpected pops up. And that's the moment where we get off, right? And how did you find clarity in those moments? Because that's what we need in those moments is clarity. If we can have clarity and see the vision again, see the mission, then we can maybe start to problem solve and find a way beyond this obstacle. Do you have some stories or examples?
Yeah. So I think when I look at like probably 3 of the most important entrepreneur lessons that I've had, it's number 1, don't quit. Number two, don't run out of cash.
Yeah.
And number three is, proactively manage my mental health. And when we, so the second company, so I built this first company, started that in college and had that for 12 years and thought, this is so niche. It's not a company that anyone is ever going to buy. And I'll probably just have it forever. And, but it's great. And, I enjoyed it and we were doing really well and it was getting competitive, but we just kind of found a way to just dominate in the market. And then a phone call came from a big company that wanted to buy us and they threw a couple of offers and was like, oh, wow, they're serious. And so, the last offer we agreed to and ended up selling the company. And it's one phone call changes everything. And I never thought that would happen and never thought we'd be able to sell it. And so the second company that I did, the first company was just out of like, well, okay, my alternative is to go be a waiter at, Olive Garden or whatever. And I'm being somewhat facetious on that, but like, it was just purely opportunistic, right? So the second company, it was like much more methodical in what I wanted to build and what I found my passion to be and my strengths. And it was like, okay, I love software and I love technology and was used to recurring revenue and wanted customers outside of the US and kind of scale it kind of at different countries. And that's an interesting problem. So I had all these different components. And so every idea I just kind of bumped it up against my list of what I wanted, my ideal company to have. And then settled on, data and analytics for a certain segment of the market. It's like, oh, this will be really cool. So I had this clear vision, right? And we built and launched it. And you just think, okay, you have this launch day and you think it's this event. And hey, once we go live, companies are just going to come running with their credit card and people are going to love it. And so we poured our heart and soul into this thing for like almost a year and then we launched it. And that sounds kind of crazy if anyone's doing like service-based companies, because it's like, oh, you're profitable day one. And, it's much easier to get up and going versus, a digital product like software. And so we take this thing almost a year, we launch it, and then you just get punched in the face by the market. And it's like, it's like, hey, why doesn't it have this, this, and this? It's lacking this functionality that we like is really weak here. We're not going to pay for it unless you can do these changes to it. And so it just, we had to take another year to kind of retool it and add more functionality, change that. And, sure, it could have been faster. I made mistakes as CEO, but it's not that unlikely in software or not that, common in software that it's great out of the gate. And so, had to do that. And then we launched it again. And after that second launch, then Microsoft came into the space with a competing product. Google came into the space with a competing product. Amazon came into the space with a competing product. And then our other closest competitor that we were most like raised another $750 million in cash to go compete.
Wow.
And so then it's like, okay, wow, are we really doing this? And talk about having everything cloudy again. And and then it's how do you compete with people that it is really difficult to compete with? And what's our strength and how do we even stand out in the market? And it ended up being great. And we created a really nice niche for ourselves that like we felt fairly protected in the market and kind of found our spot. And then we just stepped on the gas with what we were good at. And that company worked out great and had a good exit from that. But that's one example that comes to mind of just things get cloudy really quick and competitors can do that. The market changing can do that.
Oh, totally. And just for clarification, that first year and then launching punched in the face second year developing software. Like from what I know, software development is like crazy expensive. And it sounds like you were self-funding that from the previous exit, correct? So
the first company was bootstrapped. And when I took it over, we never went a month losing money. We were profitable every single month from the time that I took the company over to the time I sold it.
wow.
And but that was more of a service-based company. That's easier to do. On this one, I self-funded it for about the first year.
Okay.
And then I went and raised venture capital money for it.
Okay.
And wanted that different experience of going down that path and learning opportunity to like have something very different. And I think it would have been impossible to compete in the market had we not done that.
Wow. Well, and even once you go raise money, you have a whole new set of problems. You have a responsibility to other people, which kind of it can potentially move you into that place of obligation and almost like working for somebody. And I know people who unexpectedly find themselves in that place once they raise money. It's like, oh, yikes, do I have a job now? And somehow you were able to find that balance.
The second you take outside money, it's no longer your company.
Yeah.
And you have a responsibility to kind of manage that and care for it differently than if you were just doing it on your own.
Yeah.
And, we went through a period where it was really tough. And I had to go through kind of this laddering approach of, okay, do I still believe in the mission and what we're doing? Like, really, do I really believe it?
Mm-hmm.
And does it still apply? And then do I even want to be doing it? Mm-hmm. And do investors, or am I the best one to do this and fulfill the mission?
Man.
And do investors think that I'm still the right one to do? So I had to call, I'm going through this kind of internal struggle, right? And I remember calling all of my board members who were investors and said, hey, here's where I'm at. I still believe in this. I've had a lot of reflection on it. I still believe in what we're doing. It's not going according to plan, but I still believe in it. And I still believe that I'm the best one to do it. If you don't think I am, I want you to tell me that now. I don't want to be surprised in a board meeting. And fortunately, they all, these were individual calls, but everybody was really supportive.
Wow.
And then it was like, okay, they think I'm the one. I think I am the one. Do I even want to be the one to go do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so those were kind of those were the steps in the process I went through when things weren't going to plan and it didn't meet expectations.
And what's so cool in that is I think it's easy to start something, right? Not easy to start something, but in the beginning, it's obviously yours and you're obviously choosing it. But at that point, you brought on investors, you could have slipped into that obligation. But even in that moment, you said, do I want this? And I think that's a question that we constantly need to be asking ourselves, because we can catch ourselves in that place of obligation versus choosing and pull ourselves out of it. And you pulled it apart and looked at it and said, here's all of the issues that we're dealing with. Do I believe that I am the best person to lead this? And you asked yourself honestly, and you came up with an honest answer, which is yes. And I love that you were open with your board saying, I believe I am capable of this. Do you believe I am? Tell me if I'm in a delusional.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no, I think part of that is just taking the ego out and saying, look, if somebody is going to grow my equity greater than I can, would I turn things over to them? And it's like, I would. Mm-hmm. But in the moment, I didn't think there was anyone that could do a better job than I was doing or could do.
Yeah.
Coming in. So, asking those hard questions. And fortunately, the board was really supportive.
Yeah. It's really cool to hear you externalize your internal world and the questions that you're asking, the things that you're looking at, the brutal truth and honesty that you have with yourself. Do you have practices that you do to do that? Do you do it all in your head? Do you and Lindsay externalize a lot? Do you journal? What are ways in which you examine that kind of battle that goes on inside of you?
I think two things come to mind. Lindsay, for sure, having someone really supportive who is, my biggest cheerleader and champion. And then, I've been in a group like an EO forum for years, maybe 14, 15 years where, and the reason I choose to stay in that group is that it's a forcing function for me to reflect every month to say, what is working and what's not working in my life, and get really open and real about it and show up and talk about it to a group of peers. And that to me has really been helpful.
I love this. And I've watched you and Lindsay have conversations, and I see how she stays engaged in the conversation. There's sometimes the spouse can get overwhelmed and kind of check out, and maybe she had those moments. But, I talk with entrepreneurs who are in the messy middle and who intentionally don't have those conversations with their spouse because they feel like that will bring her down. That's too much stress for her. I need her to stay up. And I have witnessed how, as they kind of have the courage to share the load with their spouse and their spouse can handle it, like it actually really helps. Did you guys have to go through a period where it was hard for her to see just how maybe insecure things were at the time? And how did you navigate those things? And was it over time that she developed this ability to have uncomfortable business conversations with you? And not check out? That's the thing that I noticed with Lindsay, and I really admire and respect that she doesn't check out with it. And the first version that I heard of your entrepreneurial story was from her. And I was like, Lindsay, you know a lot. You knew a lot of what was going on. And that's not always the case.
Towards the end of that first company, right towards the end, when I was going through the process, I really opened up to her, and she was so helpful and has this incredible instinct and perspective. And it was just like when I was a little cloudy and fuzzy, it was really clear to her. And I was like, I never gave her the credit that she deserves on how just intuitive she is and how, she's just a really great big picture thinker. And things just come natural for her. And so with Grow, I really leaned in on that, and I shared. And when things were really tough, I just shared all the things that were tough. And she didn't have the perspective of the hope and some of the wins that I was experiencing to kind of balance that. Right. So I just came home and kind of dumped on hey, I need some help. These are things that I'm really struggling with. And it really weighed her down too much. And I shouldn't have done that, or I should have balanced that out with sharing way more of the wins that we were having versus hey, I need your help. I'm really struggling in these areas, or the company's not working in this. What do you think? Because I was looking for that because she's so good with it. I didn't do it right with Grow until towards things started to work, and I started to share more of that and learned okay, I got to dial that back a little bit on some of the things that are weighing me down and balance it out. And I got better with that over time. But I didn't do it right all the time.
And you mentioned that you've worked with coaches. You mentioned that you're in this group, which is a form of coaching. I'm really curious, maybe some of the breakthroughs that you had with coaches. As an entrepreneur is growing their business, their greatest limiter is them. And so we have to be willing to grow and expand and acknowledge our weaknesses, which you seem to be quite good at anyways. But like, what were some of your greatest breakthrough moments that you could share?
Yeah. Early on, with the first company, right? I hadn't done this before. I hadn't ever had a real job. And so, um, it was, okay, what can I control? Right. Cause you go and launch this thing or jump into it, and then you feel like everything's out of your control. And it's like, okay, the one thing I can control is my work ethic. So I'm just going to work really, really hard and outwork this thing. And so I spent a lot of hours in the office, and I was always the first one in, last one out. And I would get frustrated with people around me who weren't working as hard as I was, or putting in, cared as much as I did. And the reality is nobody cares as much as you if you start the company, right? And so I hired this coach, and the first thing that she did was help. Okay, like let's establish what are the KPIs and the drivers that really move the needle on this business. And we went through a process to kind of really identify that and dial it down. And that was the most transformational thing, one of the most transformational things I did in the company. And it pulled me out of this, like, well, let's just work harder, to, okay, if we just apply focus in these areas, like we know if we're winning or losing based on the scorecard. And it had such an impact. And all of a sudden I could take I could, take a breath of relief. And I didn't feel like I was frustrated constantly with people. I felt like we were on the same side together, looking at the problem, saying, okay, how do we work on this together? How do we move that needle? And it was so impactful that, like, I said, okay, that was incredible. Getting to that was really brutal. How do I automate and build software that tracks all of our KPIs? And that was the impetus for the second company that I started. It was like, I wanted to solve a problem I had. And so that was like the vision of what we set out with Grow, the second company I did. So that was one. And the second one was just going through such a difficult time at Grow and such a difficult landscape in the market that I lost clarity on how to get what I wanted. And that was what led me into another coaching relationship that was really beneficial for me. And just getting clarity of, okay, you really care about the mission, vision. What is that? And, you chose this path. Do you still want to be on it, and why? And working through those things. So yeah, it was a lot of internal work.
So the first coach helped you move the needle by identifying your KPIs and like aligning you and your team around those KPIs. Those became the problem, not you or them.
Yes. And it became so much more fun when we did that.
Yeah.
And that's when, like, the results really started to happen and growth really went up and to the right.
Yeah. How did she help you identify your specific KPIs?
We went through basically like, she had a framework, like a template, basically around kind of P&L, balance sheet, customer satisfaction, whether it's CSAT or NPS and some other things. And she started out with a template, but it took her a few months to kind of understand the nuances of our business. And then within her framework, we started debating, things that were really important that we looked at. Then we would track certain things for like a month or two and say, this doesn't really even, like, whether this is up or down is really, not relevant. And so we throw that one out. Or it's like, hey, this is really nice to track, but it is so time consuming to get this data that it's not worth it. And we throw that one out.
Okay.
And so we refined it down to maybe, probably 20 in the business that really mattered. And then every department head owned, a few of that 20.
And you threw out the rest.
And throughout the rest. Yeah.
That's great. That's really awesome. And I think it's important for all of us to hear that it took several months working with an expert, utilizing her proven framework, but you're a unique company. And so there's like kind of a limit to which she kind of can help you find the answers. And then there's this kind of problem solving process where we have to like really try and test things. As a product designer, that's where you're like prototyping. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Actually, we've been tracking that for 2 months now. It actually is irrelevant. So let's throw that one out. And what helped you stay confident in her and her process in that messy middle? I mean, were there moments where it felt like this isn't working? I thought we would have been here by now.
I think, maybe the first 70% we got kind of right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that 30% that was more nuanced to the business, that was more technical, that we had to refine over time. Mm-hmm. And so what I saw immediately happen just as we started the process was that accountability naturally increased. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have to push it. Mm. And that to me was like, oh, wow, this is really starting to transform the business. And I'd hear leaders in the company say, well, what would Lisa say about that? And Lisa was our coach, right? And it was great because it wasn't like, what would Rob say about that? Yeah. And they just kind of held themselves to a higher standard. Mm-hmm. I think having her there, having a third party, having a coach come in and ask tough questions and challenge the team. And that's what I had her doing as she was coming in.
So it sounds like she was not only working with you, was she also working with the team as well?
She was.
That's so good. So good. That's great. That's awesome.
Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katierichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show.
One of the things that we haven't mentioned, as you have built multiple software companies and been in the messy middle for many, many years, is you were also having children. You have 5 kids. And so like that, the businesses in themselves were extremely complex. And then you throw into the mix 5 beautiful children that you love and care about. And so at any moment, oftentimes it can feel like the things that you care about are at odds with each other. Are there any values, principles that helped you navigate moments where you're trying to figure out where to point your attention in that specific moment? And how did you, because, if we take our eye off the ball in our business for too long, some things can become irreparable. And if, and vice versa. So how did you create, I don't even know if balance is the right word, but how did you navigate this multidimensional life that you were building and creating in a way where you weren't creating a level of destruction that was irreparable? Because that's one of the things that I see in you, Rob, is you have this beautiful marriage. You've been married, 22, 23 years? How long have you guys been married?
22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
next week,
you've got an amazing son who's out serving a mission, 4 beautiful daughters who are doing amazing things. One's going off to college soon. And not just your success in business, but what I see entrepreneurs wanting is the whole package, which I'm not here to say that you're perfect and that Rob has it all figured out. I know that there's still difficulties and oppositions, and yet kind of the big things that matter are intact for you. So what are some kind of key thoughts, philosophies, principles that have helped you navigate? Because that's the tricky part, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think, so a couple of thoughts. One is, a supportive partner has made, all the difference, and supportive from day one, and kind of knew this is the journey and this is what it's going to take. And I'm supportive of that.
So not only did you sign up and choose it, but she signed up for it as well and chose it.
Yeah, that's right.
She wasn't drug along.
She did. And, I look back on all of the stuff that she had to do alone, and it blows me away. She did a lot on her own, and it's tough. And there were times that, with early, young kids that I'd get a call, not very often, but occasionally get that call like, hey, Rob, if you love your kids, you need to get home right now. That's like, okay, I got to cancel the rest of my day and get home. Like, this is not common, but it's coming and she needs me. And so I think some of that give and take. But she's, I give a lot of the credit to her. She's been a great supportive partner. And then it's like, okay, how do you get two birds with one stone and look for opportunities like that? To spend time with the kids and still work. It's like, okay, this one needs some daddy-daughter time or whatever. It's like, okay, you're coming to the office with me today and you're going to do school from my office and we'll go to lunch, but I've got to still put in a full day of work. And we did that. There were times where the kids would have a sleepover in the office. We'd make it like a camp out, and so, those opportunities. And I also remember doing just setting expectations, and not just with my family, but with my team's family. And so I remember for years and years, we would do what I would call leadership late night. And leadership team, I would say, hey, look, you need to tell your partners that Thursday night is leadership late night. You can be home at a reasonable hour, but I need you late Thursday night. And everybody would work until we brought dinner in, and then we would sit there and jam for a few hours during dinner and after of the important but not urgent things in the business. And when you have there were times of just magic out of that, where I could tell we wrapped it up. Everybody's kind of walking to their car together, but nobody wanted to go home. And we just had a lot of fun together. And it's we all kind of wanted just to hang out and talk about stuff and solve problems and, spend more time together. And those were the magic moments of the culture and the business that were there that I miss a lot.
That's so good. Leadership late night, setting that standard and expectation, not just with your family, but with your team's family. And I mean, you've brought this word up multiple times, fun. Rob, what is your thinking around fun and business? Does it happen accidentally? Are you intentionally trying to engineer it in? Does it just show up serendipitously?
I think that, so I'll tell you the one thing that I had to engineer in. But in general, I think when you have people when you have the vision and mission clearly articulated and the purpose of the business, and people connect with that, that's where I think the fun starts, because then you work with regardless of the personalities and what, when you think of fun, I'm thinking okay, things that that are everybody else would consider fun. But I think for me, the fun was solving really hard problems in an area that I cared deeply about, that other people cared deeply about, that we were aligned on the vision for, and we enjoyed being around each other. That is where the fun comes from.
Mm.
Where it was meaningful and fun. Like I liked being around these people. They were smart. They cared deeply about what we did and wanted to solve a big problem and make a difference. And that's where the fun was. Now, where I needed to engineer it a bit was learning how to celebrate half wins. Because I mean, I'm my toughest critic.
Love it.
If you can't tell, I'm my toughest critic, right? So it's like, we'd have a win, and it's like, well, it could have been a little bit better. I mean, we could have closed the account faster, or we had to give on this point and give up some revenue, or so it's always a little bit of that, right? And I think that's normal and natural with entrepreneurs or leaders. And so it's like learning how to celebrate half wins and engineering, like, okay, we're going to take time. We're going to celebrate this, because I'm always living in like the future, but learning how to like pause and say, hey, let's acknowledge the good that just happened and let's celebrate it.
Yeah. How would you very specifically celebrate it in those moments? Was it just taking a pause to acknowledge and like, or were there, I don't know, some sort of rituals that came out of this celebrating half wins?
Yeah. I mean, for us, a lot of that celebration. So I'll give you two examples, being a software company. One was, just around product launches. And we had like, kind of a big industrial space, and we had balloons and confetti hanging, and we launched this product and hit like, we had this big ceremony, the whole company's there. We had like one of the lead engineers, like, hit the final command line and like hit enter as we launched this new product. It's been tested and it goes live right there in front of everybody. And it's like you have to create the, the win, because it's like fairly quiet. It's like selling a company, it's like ends up being a DocuSign, and I'll tell you about that story. But like, so we like hit this, and then balloons drop, confetti, and we had like, cool. Sparkling cider for everybody, and everybody's partying and loud music. Another win that we did is every time a sales rep closed a deal, we had somebody do a hack with the software where a deal would get closed and would push out the Slack in a channel, and it would automatically play this song, this like money rap song that would thump through the office, right? So like everybody's working, everybody's concentrating, and then this money rap song would get blasted on the speakers, just a clip of it. And everybody kind of smiled and knew what was going on. And it was just like constant, like throughout the week, and it was really fun. But, looking at the example of selling a company, right? It's like, you think that there's going to be this great parade and, big celebratory event. And I'm telling my kids, like on this last company I sold, I'm telling my kids, it's like 9:00 at night. I'm like, guys, stay up with me. Like this is as official as it gets, because I'm waiting on attorneys to send the final version, and then I digitally sign it, and we're going to celebrate as a family. And they're like making edits, and I'm thinking like, well, this was like at 7:00 at night. I'm thinking, oh, it'll come by 9. Well, 9 comes and passes, like 9:30, kids are getting tired. 10:00, they're like, Dad, we're going to bed. And then at like 11:30 at night, Lindsay's asleep. I've got my laptop in bed, and it comes, and I'm like, this is so anticlimactic. And I like sign the DocuSign, and it's done. It's like, okay, you got to create the celebration after.
It's so cool to hear you use that word, celebrate the half wins, because to your standard, this is what I see so often with CEOs. Like, we have a very high standard, very high expectation. And unless it's that, it doesn't count a lot of times in your mind.
Yeah.
And and then that just leaves your team constantly never measuring up, never making progress, never accomplishing anything. Because by the way, also, once you hit that mark, well, guess what? You already moved your your aim beyond that mark anyway. So it's no big deal that we already hit it.
Right.
Because I've already moved the target. And so like,
That's spot on.
yeah. And so to kind of meet your team at where they're at, and because they have a different standard and expectation than you. They just do. First of all, they don't own the company. And even if they have equity in it, they're just not built like you. And so making sure that you are buoying them up and helping them feel the progress that they need to feel to be in momentum, to have confidence, to do all the things that they're doing. I love this, celebrating the half. Because see, I talk about celebrating wins, but not the half wins. I like that. I like that verbiage. It's really good.
Yeah. There's a great, I think it's a Harvard Business Review article that came out years ago called The Power of Small Wins. And the most motivating thing for employees is progress.
Yeah.
Right. And so the whole article is this concept of, recognizing the progress that's happening. And so everybody sees that. And that is what builds the culture.
To use that word, that's the other thing I'm seeing. You didn't fake some company culture and, write it up in a Word document and say, okay, everybody, here's who we are. Like, it sounds like your culture almost naturally evolved out of the questions you were asking yourself, the observations you were making of your team, the ways in which you were really believing in your mission. And like, how can we do everything in your power to support your team and moving towards this mission? So it seems like culture kind of naturally rose out of those questions and the things that you were seeking.
Yeah. I mean, we did write them out, but they naturally came out, right? Because you create, I think you establish what the mission and vision is, or vision and are, and then you hire smart people, and then you kind of watch things naturally happen. Early stages. Okay. So here's like a great example. I spent, in software, I don't code. I know enough to kind of architect with the team. And so we architected the application and then they went off to code it. And then I'm twiddling my thumbs, getting really antsy. So I start to like build marketing plans and start to build like culture documents and things that I want in the culture. And then, we launched it and I get punched in the face. And I'm like, okay, none of that matters. Culture doesn't matter. What matters is like, we have to survive and we have to get product market fit. Okay. So, then I go work on that problem. And then things just naturally happen. And so like early on in our company, we had this girl, we were all in this office and the sprinklers would spray, water the grass by the windows and they would overspray and hit our windows every morning. And the hard water spots on these windows were so bad and nasty and everybody complained about it. And so I'm hearing people complain about it. And then we hear like this clunking noise. And we look out and it's Linda who works for us. And she ran home during lunch, grabbed a ladder, grabbed a tool belt, had all of these window cleaning supplies on her hip in her tool belt. And she's up like spraying it and treating these windows and with a squeegee cleaning them. And so we said, hey, one of our cultures is we wash the windows. And it became like a really great visual for everyone. And somebody in that moment took a picture of it. And so that kind of picture became like one of our, core values in the company and part of the culture. And it was kind of this folklore that was told by everybody, right? That like, hey, it doesn't matter if it's your job or not your job. You see a problem, you go solve it. Yeah. And I think that's what, built our culture, is just these experiences like that and these stories that we would tell.
So good. So often the values and then the subsequent culture, it's just, as the owner and creator, it's just who you are. It's how you move through the world. But until it is defined in a document and then like reiterated in meetings and conversations, that it starts to become a defined culture that then spreads. And, you do have to pause and articulate your vision. You do have to pause and describe the mission and like really search within yourself. Something's calling to me, something's driving me. What is that? And having the boldness or audacity to begin to define that takes a lot of courage. But once you do, like one of the things I'm seeing is you were really good at leading your team and like empowering them. Not from a way of trying to control everybody. It sounds like you really set them up for success by saying, this is where we're going. These are the ways in which we want to move to get there, right? AKA, here's kind of our values and culture. And, I trust you. I brought you on because you're an A player. And like, you have gifts and talents that I don't have. And so I'm going to rely on those. I'm going to lean on you. And there's a level of trust that has to happen there. And too often I see people who are trying to control everything in their business and they end up becoming the bottleneck. And there may be times in your history where you saw that you experienced some of that, but like a powerful way to lead your team is exactly what you're laying out for us. And it can feel kind of out of your control. And yet, what are you seeing?
A really great example that one of the coaches I've had me do, and a great example of that is, we had our vision really well defined. I spent a bunch of time wordsmithing this just right. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to go I was going to do an offsite with the team." And the coach said, "Why don't you go around and ask everybody on the leadership team to stand up, and everybody takes a turn and says what the vision of the company means for them, and say there's no right or wrong answer."
Yes.
You don't. And I kind of expected everybody to like memorize our vision and say it word for word because those words were meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted them to do it a certain way. And he said, make the point that there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. Just say what the vision means to you. And when we did that and created that space, people were like emotional and they said really incredible things. And it was, yes, directionally correct with where we were going and it was aligned, but they said it in a way that connected to them and it was meaningful and it became much more deeper. And I just remember after that exercise being like, that was awesome. And I felt like everybody connected to what we were doing from that exercise in a way that we'd never had before.
It's so good. That is so good. And that's empowering people, right? You're helping them to discover their own desire, their own wanting, and saying, how does the mission of this company, what's the bridge that connects what you already want and are striving for in your personal life? How does it connect with the mission of this company? And what's so incredible about that is in that moment, the business becomes a vehicle for each of them to accomplish their life's purpose. Hello. It's amazing. So good. Yeah. So good. Rob, I love this. So many gems that have come out of our conversation today. And I'm super appreciative of you taking the time to have this conversation, going deep with me and like really describing that messy middle that is so uncomfortable. It's a desert and it can be really lonely. And you've had the wisdom to marry an incredible woman who's willing to walk through that desert with you and work with coaches, be in masterminds, mentor groups where you don't have to be alone. I think that's a huge mistake. If I'm going to own this company, therefore, I have to do everything on my own and I can't have advisors. I can't have outside input. And that's just small thinking. And it's really cool to hear the story of how you've navigated all of these things. So thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I coming back to, my thoughts around entrepreneurship of don't quit, don't run out of cash, and proactively manage your mental health. And so much of that third one of managing my mental health has really come from working with coaches like you.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we worked together because you would have been really, really helpful for me. But I think that's one of the benefits of working with someone like you is, working on that mental game, because it is challenging and you are alone and you do feel like alone and unsure of like, is this even right anymore? And it is a hard process. And now looking back, it's like, oh, there's really just a few things that I did that made all of the difference and ended up creating a really great outcome. Coaches was definitely one of them.
That's really cool.
So I think you're really talented and everyone should work with you.
Thanks, Rob. Before we end the conversation, can I ask you a few more rapid fire type questions?
Sure.
What's something that you do consistently every day?
I'm trying to, not perfect at this, but working at it every day, which is having a daily devotional, something that kind of feeds my soul and spirit daily. And that could be listening to a podcast out on a walk. That could be having some meditation or a longer prayer. That could be doing, reading scriptures, whatever it is. It's like every day trying to get into that routine of just a daily devotional.
So good. I love it. Is there a book? Oh,
I'm working on that. Not perfect, working at it.
like this is where your perfectionism's showing up. You're pretty darn good at it, I'm guessing here, Rob. Is there a book that you find yourself rereading that maybe you keep it on your nightstand, you gift it frequently?
There's so many books that are like impactful for me at different stages and at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think, because I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship, I come back to The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And that's the name of the book. And that's a really incredible one that I come back to and recommend a lot. I think people that are feeling like they're in that messy middle, that's the name of the book, The Messy Middle. I think that's a really great one. That's really been impactful. And then The One Thing.
So good.
Those are three.
Love it. So good. You mentioned really early on some advice that you'd gotten. Forget all about the experts, boil it down to common sense. Is there any other wisdom or good advice that you were given in a critical moment that helped you overcome?
I think, someone shared this with me yesterday. I'm sure I can find it here.
We have time.
Okay. Okay, here it is. I think this was like Plato or something like that. Those who tell stories rule society. And that's the quote, I heard yesterday. Those who tell stories rule society. And I think if I do have a strength, it's in creating a compelling story. And what was really beneficial for me that I'd recommend everybody do is create a deck like you were selling your company. What makes it unique? Where do you stand? Where do you position yourself in the market? And why is the company unique? Why does it matter? And going through that exercise alone and being able to storytell the company, just, it wasn't until I did that where I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to take this and modify our sales deck. modify how we market the company and position ourselves a little bit differently. And you just get really clear on the story. And that was really beneficial, but it comes back to that quote.
That's so good. That's so good. You can answer this one however you would like, but what's working now?
What's working now is I sold the company 2 years ago, and I feel like I'm raising kids. So I'm spending a lot of time with my kids, and that's what's working now. I mean, I love it, and there will probably be something that I feel so strongly about that I get pulled back in to go build something else. But right now, I'm just focused on the family.
So good. I love that. Rob Nelson, are you open to sharing the story of grow.com and how you acquired that as your domain? I'm saying this at the end because if you don't want to share that, it's totally cool.
Yeah, I can share this story.
I think it's so brilliant.
I think it's a great story.
It's such a good story.
So as I started kind of creating the company, I knew I wanted to name it Grow. I wanted to brand it Grow regardless of the domain I got. And so the best domain I could buy was growinc.com. And everything else in and around Grow was taken. And I reached out, there's a guy that owned grow.com, and he was in South Africa, and I reached out to him several times to buy it. And I thought, and I heard a story that the guy that was trying to buy clout.com with a K in San Francisco, and he was exchanging emails with the guy who owned it. And he saw that, on Twitter or something, he checked in when Foursquare was a thing. He checked in at a restaurant. So he runs downtown San Francisco, runs over to this restaurant, spots him from his profile picture out at the table. And he had 10 grand in cash. And this is the story I was told. Yeah. And he says, "Hey, I'm the guy trying to buy your domain." Walks up to him, says that at the table. And he opens his brown bag and dumps the 10 grand of cash at the table. He says, "Come on, can we just do this now?" Yeah. And it was something about like the money right there in his face that he couldn't turn down. He said, let's do it. So that's how that deal got done. And so I thought, let me just take a similar approach. And I, this guy wasn't responding to me. I couldn't get a response. I said, "Hey, I'll wire you $250,000 for the domain, like right now. Like you'll get it in a couple of hours. Can we do this deal?" And I finally get a response back that says it's not for sale. I'm like, get lost, get out of here. And so it's like, okay, what do you do? Like, it's not being used, not getting a response. It's like, let me just change the conversation. Like, and I wrote him back. I said, "Are you open to leasing it?" And immediately, like, "Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it." And so, as a startup, it was perfect solution at the time. It was like, I got to lease this thing for dirt cheap. And I had, a contract that I felt secure enough where I could go invest in building a brand around that domain and locked it up. So I think it's a really great option for entrepreneurs that can't get the domain they want, but nobody's using it, is to lease it. And you can figure out a way to kind of feel comfortable and safe investing in the brand with a lease domain.
So good. Just another beautiful example of you being curious, asking new questions, problem solving, coming up with solutions, and coming up with this very unexpected solution of leasing the domain. It sounds like he maybe for some reason was emotionally attached to owning grow.com, which why wouldn't he be? That's like so good. It's so good. And you found a solution. Yeah, I love that you didn't settle for growinc.com. I love that.
Yeah, that would have been a big mistake. I mean, it adds so much credibility. It added so much credibility in the early days as we launched to all of a sudden come out and it's like, holy cow, these guys are legit.
Yeah, I think especially when you talked about very quickly, your competition was Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and you were grow.com. So good.
Grow.com. Yeah. Great name. Great brand. Really proud of what we did.
Yeah, I am too. I'm a huge fan of it. Rob, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you for the conversation, for telling your story, for inspiring, for bringing and shining a light on the messy middle and the less glamorous parts of entrepreneurship. I know I've been uplifted, enlightened, learned a ton in this conversation. I know our audience has as well. Are you active on any social platforms that if somebody wanted to just send a big thank you to you, where would they send that?
LinkedIn is where I'm most active. Yeah. Hit me up on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think it's Rob W. Nelson is the, LinkedIn.com//Rob W. Nelson.
Okay. And we can do a link in the show notes to your LinkedIn.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
Awesome.
Great to be on and great chatting with you about this fun stuff.
Yeah, same. And for everybody who's listening, this is What's Working Now.
Thanks for listening to the What's Working Now podcast. If you found today's episode to be interesting, be sure to share this with a friend. And if you are looking to level up your organization as a CEO, I'm going to invite you to join the Now newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter. I send it out on Fridays. I tell personal stories, talk about what it's like to build a significant business while raising a family, homeschooling kids. And I even share case studies, very timely, relevant situations where I go into detail how I am helping entrepreneurs navigate, lead, and build incredible organizations. You can get all of that behind the scenes information and more inside the Now newsletter. I've got a link to it right now in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode.